Welcome to Duncan Thorin Shield's YouTube channel. I managed to con Duncan into convincing his friend to pay me thousands and thousands of dollars as a professional Counter-Strike player, so maybe he can convince you that some of his analysis is correct.
Talent are the professionals on camera in esports. The term comes from, I think it's the movie, the TV industry. I know idiots, this is always how you can tell they're idiots, come along and think we made it up or we're calling ourselves talent, therefore we're saying we're talented. Spoiler, we are talented. That's the whole reason we fucking do the job. But okay, have your cope, mate. It's a waste of time to even address that because it just comes from ignorance. So we're definitely not changing the term to something to make people who are triggered on the internet feel all right. And by the way, if you're from the CIS region or certain other parts of the world, this is just a tip for you. I know it might be difficult to read the word on paper, but it's called tier. Don't say tire, because otherwise, unfortunately, despite the fact it might look like it's written that way, people might not understand. If you keep saying tire 1, they might think you're talking about fucking Formula 1, mate, before pit stop or something. So levels of talent can be varying massively because think of the experience and the skill sets of the people we're talking about. Like it could be an amateur doing their first event or events, could be a semi-pro working their way up from the smaller parts of the circuit and getting their chances in the bigger events, could be a fully tenured professional with awards, years of excellent performance, a built-up body of skills that last them the test of time. Thus, just like with pro players, tiers are the terminology that we use. Also, tiers are what we get from fans, but again, that's a pun, spelt differently. Sadly, people seem to have just taken the premise that they like someone as meaning that person is tier 1 or the best or among the best, which, by the way, it speaks to the degree to which charisma and likability play a role in such conversations. So what is tier 1? First of all, I think it is a much, much smaller group in each game than most of the discourse or discussions and fan talk suggests. Like, it should be an elite group because this is something you have to earn your way into with performance. You can never boost someone there just because they have potential or you like them or they're very, very good at one specific thing. If you do, by the way, you're not even doing them a favour. Like many of them will just sink because you'll put them into a set of circumstances they're not capable of dealing with. Maybe they're working with other tier 1 talents who just throw comments to them or don't set them up or don't tell them in advance what they want to do because that's how we sometimes operate at the tier 1 level. We're just going free form because everyone's supposed to be a pro and be the best at their job. And if you do that, you throw someone in there because you like them too early, some of them will sink. I would contrast it with how certain social policies in some Western countries basically make entering university or college easier for certain demographics of the population, which therefore means that person scored lower on the entrance tests. So logically, unless they can put an incredible amount of work, or it's a field in which it's not about having like intelligence or something, they're going to have a very, very hard time going head to head with the top people. And they're going to feel like shit. They're going to be the outsider. They're going to be the worst person there. And they're going to feel it. They're going to know that they're not as good. It's not going to be good for them. They'd be better to be the king of the tier 2 in that sense and go to tier 1 if it was appropriate. Now, I get it. Fans don't know the technical skills. Fans have never worked in the industry. Fans want novelty sometimes. Maybe they don't watch the game very much. They're casual, so they want a new voice, a new person. They've heard the same guy before. He's already sort of worn a groove in their brain. They want to hear something fresh, something they haven't heard before. Or maybe they just don't understand the nuances of the job. That's all fine. This is why, by the way, in every game, when pro players first start doing these gigs, or just do the gigs at a tournament they're not attending, in terms of like as a player, they are always mega over it. I'm not even saying over it. They're mega overrated because first of all, fans just like him, so they overlook all the technical skills they don't have. They don't have any teamwork or skills usually, and half the time other tier 1 talent are just coaching those guys behind the scene. Like, okay, you do it like this, like, I'll throw it to you here, what do you want to talk about? Like making them as good as they can look, just giving them alley-oops all day long, and they're still not as good as the rest of us that do it for a fucking full-time living when we do it as a full-time living if we're tier 1. That's right, I'm tier 1 motherfucker. I'm box office. If you don't like it, just go crazy in the comments, watch the video. Why are you watching the video? Exactly, enough said. So in my opinion, to be tier 1, you have got to have an all-around skill set and package or talent stack, whatever you want to say. You can't just be good at one thing or decent in a few areas. You've got to have like an all-round skill set. Not necessarily in every area, but you've got to be well-rounded. You've got to be polished as well. You've got to have refined your thing. You've got to know yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, how to display what you're doing. Now, events do fuck with fans. I don't blame them in this sense because events will use the fact that they want to have power over talent or they want to have manipulation over whether talent work their events or how they charge for them. They want to get talent for cheaper than the top rates. So as a result, you will see tier 1 events all the time in esports, the biggest events in the world. And you might naively think, well, they must be all the best people, all the best talent if they've been hired for that event. No. Because the theory that the best events and the biggest events hire all the best tier 1 talent is nonsense. Outside of maybe a couple of the CSGO majors, and even then, not all of them, and most not the case. And in fact, I look at TI, I look at World Championship, League of Legends, MSI. There's been many, many times that the best talent weren't hired for these particular events. Now, part of that is the effect of rising rates. People know how to negotiate and negotiate harder and have agents, etc. now. So as a result, most TOs, most tournament organisers, most events use a balance. What they do, they tend to hire their favourite tier 1 people, either people they've worked with a lot, or they have a good relationship, or they can easily make a deal with, or they just can meet that guy's rate. Then they'll hire a bunch of tier 2 for lesser rates, but are pretty good. Maybe people on the brink of being tier 1, so it still looks like they're really good. You're rounding out the show. And then you maybe even chuck 1 or 2 tier 3 people in there. Just very, very cheap for you as an event. They get a little boost. They maybe feel some sort of loyalty to you, and you can maybe exploit that if they then move up to tier 2 in the future, get them for cheaper or more often, or if it's a tiebreaker with another event. There's all sorts of fuckery in the industry goes on in that regard. Also, they tend, quite frankly, TOs, especially the open circuit, to want to pit duos against each other, again, for longer term discounts, for control, to determine what their brand is. Maybe they don't want to let you in the brand, like E-League, when they wouldn't have Henry G and Sadakist, even though they were actually the best talent in CSGO at the time. I think, quite frankly, I've alluded to it before, Riot are absurdly bad at getting all the best talent to Worlds, MSI, because they are just too nepotistic and have to just bring their LCS people. They have to put those LCS casters on all the semis and the finals, even when some of them do not warrant it. Even though a couple of them, Jat, certain other names have been fantastic, some of the other names, quite frankly, never should have been there, were never the elite people, and I don't even think some of them were tier 1. There's no shame in being tier 2, by the way. But if we're talking about being tier 1, you are inferior. That's correct. Now, the skill set we're talking about, I've tried to sort of vaguely rank this in order of how important I think it is and how necessary it is. And so you're going to be shocked. Get ready. And by the way, obviously I know my own biases going in this, but I also know a lot of these people. And I've looked at even the other people with different skills and what made them tick, what put them over. Why did this guy not get there when he seemed really good in this sense? Number 1 skill, charisma. Even the person with the most knowledge, technical skill, someone who's tenured, who's hardworking, will always be held back in these roles without some degree of charisma. There's a certain charisma threshold you have got to hit, because this is an entertainment industry. You are not a college professor. You are an entertainer. You might entertain with knowledge, but that's the point. You entertain with knowledge. You don't have knowledge and then maybe a bit of entertainment. You have to entertain with knowledge. So you can translate to all levels of fan if you can entertain them, if you have charisma. Even if they don't know much about the game, they can get the vibe of what you're doing. Think of some of my classic moments, the Baguette Smash, the Shack Burn, the Black Monster Query at Epicenter. Now, it doesn't have to be just humour when we talk about charisma, of course. Like, I think of names like Red Eye, I think of sjokz, Machine, Monty, Semler, Anders. These people, I watch them myself when I'm not at events. They're just very pleasant to watch, very pleasant to listen to. They have an aura, they have a vibe about them. They just put you at ease. They get you into that right headspace. And anything they say, even a mistake, it doesn't matter. You just vibe with it. You love it. You enjoy it. It's exactly what you want to feel. And I speak from personal experience on this topic of charisma, by the way, because in the early 2010s, in CS 1.6, I came and did a bunch of work with ESL for the IEM brand. Obviously, he says I'll never be working with them again. Now, I did like the World Championship. I did a whole bunch of tournaments. I was working with Joe Miller as the colour commentator. He was the play-by-play. Now, I had at the time, because they didn't used to have top pros then, basically best colour commentary skill set of anyone. And I'd studied all the demos religiously, and I could even tell you all the crazy things I could remember. Back then I used to literally watch the demos all the time. I could tell you all sorts of things. But you know what? People initially liked it for the novelty, and they were like, oh, this guy, he's got a lot of interesting details he's bringing in, and loads of the casters were giving me compliments. ESL tried to hire me full-time, but I didn't have the charisma. I wasn't who I am now back then. I didn't really develop into that kind of a person. I wasn't even that person at the 2013 DreamHack Winter, first major in CSGO. I would say we're talking about like when I worked with Richard and the Gfinity's Angels and latter part of 2014. This is when I started to develop the charisma and the banter. And you know what? The second I did that, I went from being like decent above average or good to up to you where you want to rank me, but I think I was number 1 at certain points in times. And tell you what, no matter what you might think, you can have a look when Carmack was on By the Numbers, when Joe Miller was trying to hire me to ESL, but they wouldn't let them hire me. They'll all admit one thing. I was always fucking box office in my prime. I'd say I am right now. I bring something that the others don't because I actively tried to reflect on it. And this is an area I put a lot of work in. I would watch stand-up comedians. I would watch other people. I would try and learn people's patterns of speech. I've done a lot of interviewing, a lot of things reading body language, etc. An area I actually was very, very deficient in as a person before I started in esports. In fact, for I'd say the first 10 plus years in esports is an area I had to really level my skills up. So, eye of newt, wing of bat, hair of the dog, and skin of a cat. Mix it all up with heat flames at all. The brew goes ready for you all. I feel it beginning to take effect. Its warmth is a flickering candle to my soul, increasing in force. I feel vital, transcendent, impossible. I am the lightning, the raging power of the night. Behold my might, the true force of Gamersubs. Now, Gamersubs doesn't really contain any of those ingredients or do any of that. It's just a delicious energy formula. It's keto friendly, so use the code THORIN, Thorin, at gamersubs.gg if you want 20% off this weekend only. How about try Strawberry Burst? You know, just like how I burst onto the scene when I leveled up my charisma, and how, you know, I get that delicious flavour of getting paid by ESL after only 2 months instead of 2 months to a year, like some of the other top tier 1 talent. Now, teamwork is another very, very key area, and I would put it number 2 because you're part of a team. You're almost never on your own unless you're an interviewer, and even then, you're interviewing another person. So unless you may be a stage host thrown to the camera, and even then I'd say there's actually a relationship with your director and getting the throw off people. Teamwork is essential to this job. If you are the best ever in one area, but you can't link with others, it's like being a pro player like that. You might have the craziest mechanical skills, you won't win in the game, or it's very unlikely you'll be the best. In this field, being on-camera talent, you must be able to work well with others. The show has to flow and not feel like it's dragging. You have to fit what you're saying, what everyone's going to say, into a finite time window between breaks and games and segments. You have to address certain points that are part of the rundown in the graphics package and what we're going to show and what we're going to go to next. And you have to entertain all at the same time. Now, knowledgeable people, as a result, get massively overrated in this aspect as well as the charisma one. Like, you cannot, in this respect, be a Carmelo Anthony style black hole in the offense for the desk/cast. If they throw it to you, you do your shit and get your shit off. But then you don't, like, take the throw well, give the throw well, work with others. It's going to actually ruin the event. Even if you look good, you're going to ruin it for your teammates, basically. You have to understand at all times, it is a show, and we all contribute. I'm the scorer, let's be real. Like, I think of myself as like fucking Alex English or someone, just some guys. This is our score first and foremost. I get my shots, I get my points no matter what, but I also make sure almost every desk segment that I pass a ball off. I set an assist to someone, an alley-oop for someone else, especially if they're talent that like are newer to it or they're just coming into tier 1. I try to get them at their best and set them up in that regard, because then we all win. Then it's not just about, oh, I look good and this guy look trash. No, I don't want that. That's a fail for me. I don't like that. It's one of the reasons why talent gets so upset when people are like, listen, I like Law, but sjokz is so much better. Like, that's why people like that get triggered, because it's like, fuck, I'm trying to work with these people. These are my friends. These are other tier 1 talent. Like, do you have to phrase that way? Now, listen, if you're talent, that's the virtual barbershop is Reddit and Twitter. Like, they're allowed to have their opinion, guys. They're allowed to think who they want's better. And no, it isn't somehow, like, wrong that they comment, like, oh, this person's beautiful. Oh, this guy's very intelligent. Oh, this guy's in it. Like, it's their comments, it's their thoughts, it's their impressions, sense impressions to some degree. Like, it ain't about, like, they're not submitting a fucking manifesto. So both sides of that equation get really ridiculous, in my opinion. But my point is, when I am a scorer, etc., at the same time, I have to get you involved like a great scorer does in basketball. We're not going to win as a team. So a classic example, I'll see if I can link it actually, if not I'll link it in the description, was when at ESL 1 Cologne, at the end of a segment, I made some sort of comment about how I'd make a video about something, and Machine, who was my desk host, it was actually, I think maybe the second event he ever desk hosted for me, because we'd done Dream at Malmo earlier in the year, he made a burn on me, right? He said something like, yeah, I'll look forward to seeing it, 20 minutes of, something like 20-minute video, 2 minutes of content or something, which is, first of all, it's funny banter about my channel, I don't think it's true, of course. I think it's kind of a reductive, silly way to view it, but it's a joke. Like, you have to understand that is just a joke. Think of it like wrestling. That's like, oh, and then he does, like, you're planning the match before, and then he's going to do a suplex. Well, no, he wouldn't, because I'm a better wrestler than him. I'm stronger, I have better upper body strength, so he wouldn't be able to suplex me. It's like, your job's fucking wrestling. You're supposed to put each other over. So guess what? People think in that moment that I was owned, and I just thought, oh God, so anything. I always have something to say. But in that moment, they were saying in our ear, like end of the segment, and he's the host. He's the guy who's going to be doing these events for ESL. So in that moment, you know what? You got a fucking sick line off. People are loving it. Just let him have his moment. Let him shine. You don't have to be the guy who comes back every single time. I even did it to Shaq. People don't get this. I did my initial reply to him when he came back. But then when he went like, oh, what about boxing? And the Queen's... when he was doing all that, I was just like, yeah, just let him have it. Like, I got mine off. Now let him get his shit off. Yeah, see if he can come with something. He had nothing, of course. He was basically just fucking flailing in the air. And I was just like Anderson Silva ducking and weaving under that shit. But whatever. He gave it a try, right? How about this? I think of some of the people I've worked with over the years, something I've specifically tried to do with people like Yanko, Maniac, Sponge. These people came in with obvious potential, but they needed to get comfy. They needed to see, how do they even interact with someone like me? There's no one like me in terms of how I do it. So I was always trying to set them up, trying to make sure, if you notice in the lineup, this is something you can go look at. I always try to put myself next to the host because they tend to go down the line so that I go first with banter, jokes, all this, but, and I never encroach on what they're going to do. But if something in that what I say vibes what they want, they can click into that rather, or I can even take part of it and throw it to them. And I wondered why that was. What do you think, Yanko? And then I know he already wants to talk about this round, so he's going into it. It makes them look slick as fuck. Then we go to the third one. I would say this is where technical ability comes in. Notice we still didn't get to anything about the game itself yet. I hope some people are going to really get their eyes open by this video. Technical ability, we're going to start with this. On-camera presence. Now, this isn't as simple as charisma. It's different. There are some people who have fantastic on-camera presence who aren't necessarily super charismatic. Many people lack this, though. It's one of the reasons why when people get mad when they bring in some like outside interviewer or desk or stage host, oftentimes it might be a woman who hosts like trade shows, often television or something, or someone like OJ who's worked with like massive events and stuff. They come in with a lot of this stuff. Doesn't matter, they don't know about the game. They're not even fucking talking about the game half the time. It's an area where you could even say Frankie actually has a strength, even though she's been horrible to me, but whatever, fuck it. I give people their credit, I'm not like her. So, how about this? One of the problems with the on-camera presence is many talent in esports lack it. They just don't have it from lack of experience. They just get nervous when they're there. Maybe they're not as old as some of the rest of us. You know, it's a lot of the tier 1 are quite old compared to the others. We're not like 22 years old. I think a lot of it can be studied, but I think a lot of it is intuitive. You learn it over time, trial and error. You get comfortable in the settings. You've been there many times before. It's like playing the playoffs. If you've only played once, you might choke. You played a million times, you say, I know what it's all about. In fact, you can use that against the other person, the pressure, right? I think knowing things like where the camera is, what camera you're looking at to deliver a line, how you will look, that's always been a strength of mine, actually, once I started working on it. But it can be learned. In fact, everyone to some degree learns it. No one comes in maxed out in this skill set because you can't be. You have to get comfortable doing it. I think speaking ability is massively underrated. If you can be eloquent, people like Monty, you're going to come off fantastically. If you can simply get your words out smoothly, not too slow, but not tripping over yourself, that alone is a win right there. So many people can't do jokes because on the fly, they don't want to have to put those words together. They don't want to trip up and then get something wrong. I always give a tip. So if you're watching now and you're tier 2 or tier 3 talent, when you're doing a joke or a line, it's something you've been thinking about, not necessarily the exact words. I would go with the sentiment and deliver it freestyle. Slow down 10%. They won't notice at home. It's only 10%, but it'll allow you to feel almost like you're Neo in the Matrix. Like, all right, dodge that bullet, come under, grab his arm, come on. Like, that's what it's like. So don't rush to the punchline. Don't rush to the keyword you want to put the emphasis on. Set it up correctly and then land where you need to land and hit the high that you want to hit. Handoffs are a massive deal. How do I take what was given to me and give it to the next guy? Or take what happens on the desk and give it to the host? Or take what happens on the stage from the host and throw it to an interview? Or from an interview back to the desk or desk to the casters? This is a skill set that you'll never notice if it's done well because it should feel invisible. But this is actually one of the hardest parts actually early on because you're doing it at the drop of a hat basically. How about being able to read, especially if you're a host or working as an interviewer maybe being able to read something without it looking obvious. Like maybe I'm reading notes right now, right? I'm not entirely like I have a list of words and stuff, but you get the premise, right? Sometimes I glance back, but the skill set is I can look at you most of the time and then I look away for a brief second and I'm actually reading when I do that. You might think, oh, he's looking away, he's just thinking, and I'm reading when I do that. You don't know it because I'm fucking better than you are. I mean, you don't do this, but most people don't do this shit, right? Even simple things, by the way, like when you have to cough, What do you do when you react to others? Do you just stand there and not know that you're in a wide shot with 3 of you? Or just not even enjoying any of it? Or do you think of it like battle rap? I always loved it. I know there's defense and all the rest of it, but I always loved it when the battle rappers give each other credit. Like if they think a line's fire, they're like, oh, that's sick. I think you should do that. I think some people don't have those strengths, actually. And sometimes it actually fucks with the vibe of the show, which maybe I'll talk about later. Then we come to the one you've all been waiting for. Of course, it's game knowledge, right? Knowing about the game, being an expert. You only need enough game knowledge to do your role. I'd love to say you have to be the best at it, but I think most jobs, unless you can get a lot of those other tiers checked off in terms of the hierarchy of what I consider important, I don't think you'll be able to make use of it. And even if you do, you'd already be the best, actually, if you had all the others and you didn't have this. This is just the bonus, the cherry on top. You need enough to do your job. So if you're an analyst or an expert, yeah, you might need to go to some degree deep, but only compared to the average viewer, only to give value to the cast. Still going to matter how you deliver it. Massively so. Hence why I'm always way ahead of the curve on Deficio, LS, people like that. Maui Snake, like I always way ahead of people. Yanko, know that these guys are going to be the best before you do. Because I know if they ever get the other parts together, fucking hell, no one's going to be able to stop these guys, right? They've already got that nailed and they have to work on the other parts now. Now, I will say, if you're not an analyst, you can be very limited in your game knowledge. Just don't try and overstep your boundaries, which is what some of the people do, because so much discourse obsesses about the idea you have to know about the game, or some fan, the only way he can denigrate you is by going, well, I know more about the game than him. Well, that's irrelevant, isn't it? It's an on-camera fucking position. That doesn't even make sense. What does that even mean, mate? So that would be like saying, oh, I know more about like the chemicals involved in cleaning than this cleaner. It's like your job's to clean the fucking floor, mate. How is he doing that? Yeah, exactly. Now, if you're not an analyst, not only can you be very limited, but if you do it right, even if you're wrong or you sound like a naive, sometimes fool, it's actually can potentially help the flow of the show, because you might then be a springboard that your analysts can come back in on and give their thoughts and correct you or say something. That's one of the things I always appreciate about Machine's style. He will repeat back to the analyst, like, right, so you think that like he needs to really like get his teammates involved, like he's then translating that to the viewers and giving you a chance to bounce off or say, oh, I disagree here, or add something in and keep the flow of the show going. He doesn't even always think that, but if he does, sometimes his lack of knowledge in that sense, which obviously isn't a diss, it's not his fucking role, helps the show. Now, you can't force being tier 1 in esports. I know people are going to watch this, delete it off their brain and go ahead and do it. I get that. Again, it's the digital barbershop of the world. But it's when TOs do it that I think makes a mockery of their events. Especially if they lie and claim they do have the best, which is the ESL approach, by the way. You get 16 teams, so you say we've got the 16 best teams in the world. You don't say we've got 16 of them. You say you got 16 best because you're disingenuous pieces of shit and you don't particularly care about the history of esports. Now, the usual euphemism for the ones that are at least vaguely honest is you claim you're developing talent or like giving someone else a chance. That basically just means you want to save money, not hiring some other tier 1 talent, and you're bringing in some tier 2 talent. Okay, at least you're sort of vaguely telling the truth. You're not entirely lie of omission and all that. Now, I will say, the reason I say you can't force it is I'm going to pick a bunch of names. Some of them I think made it to tier 1. Some of them you think made it to tier 1. But I'll give you some weird things over their careers I noticed. A lot of them have been changed over time, but some of them might still exist now. And if they listen, I'm an open guy. I'm not dissing them. They can maybe take this to heart and maybe improve. When Chad Sponge first came on, he had a lot of the basics down, and I think it was very rapidly improving, 2017, coming through 2018. But I noticed, for example, his way of reacting to others, I always thought he never actually got the teamwork part in the early days. And over time, he had to learn, and he got very, very good at it, like how to work with other people, set them up. Because one of the things he used to do, think of it if you're a CS fan, is he would make his point, and then after he made his point, right, because he usually look at the host and let the producer control the cameras, he would like turn to the camera and just do this weird smile as though he was like on like a red carpet, like, while the other person's like making their point. That's something I used to think, what the fuck? That's so weird. Like, mate, that's not coming off the way you think it is on camera. Now, again, now he's very, very smooth. He knows when to do his weird little Australian smile, doesn't he? I think, quite frankly, I won't tell you this person's name because it's not someone I consider close enough that I would want to divulge this. But I worked with someone where, as mad as it sounds, something that was off-putting was when I would be making my point, they wouldn't be on camera, and so they wouldn't be cognizant of the fact that, well, I'm still looking at them. And so they would look at me, and if I'm making a joke, because initially you don't know where the joke's going, you make the punchline, you rise, and then you're going to hit you make the setup and then the punchline. As I'm about to get to the punchline, because they didn't know where I was going, they'd just be looking at me like, with like a pained look on their face. I remember just thinking like, now I have to look away because you're just fucking up my whole vibe. Like, There's another area people like Machine are fantastic. They have the perfect reaction to it. Yeah. You don't see it because there's a different camera angle, but they're giving you the stimuli to make it work. It's the same reason why if I'm doing a camera interview, I might be going, yes, sure. That's because I'm actually keeping the flow of the interview going, assuring him that things are how they should be. Keep going. This is all excellent. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I see what you mean there. I understand. You don't have to be too verbose with that. These are nuances that you're not going to pick up necessarily as a fan. I think, quite frankly, Pimp, very early on as an analyst, had a terrible charisma. That's why people didn't like him. He had anti-charisma. And listen, speaking of someone who turned anti-charisma into an entire, fucking brand, he couldn't go too far into it, though. Being the supervillain didn't fit him, and he wanted to be liked. And so I think now he's gotten a lot more charisma, and now he's starting to really add that to the desk. I'll be real with you. I like him, but I think Launders is still too dry when he's a caster for me. I think of all the crazy, amazing fucking Henry G, Semler reactions to things. And then I listen to Launders, and it's like, Launders can watch Simple, do the craziest thing ever and be like, oh, wow, I can't believe he did that. For me, if you want to be the tier 1 color, got to work on that aspect. Even though the other guys, the hypecasters, sometimes you have to compliment him. You have to set him up in that regard. I think DDK had great game knowledge, but sometimes was too long-winded or verbose, or couldn't tailor it to a segment sometimes. And sometimes the round got in the way. I think Bardolph could be too silly, could do things like, this is not FPL or whatever. That was inappropriate, basically advertising for a rival fucking TO. So I think everyone who's on the way up, there's times where they have their flaws, and they might not be obvious to fans, but people who have the skill set, they might notice it. And this is why everyone's got to keep refining their skill set. And no one's ever fully there. You're in tier 1. Doesn't mean you'll stay tier 1 forever, though. Especially because, in the context of your peers, what if they overtake you and you just stay the same? As a result, I think of names, and I'm going to be real. Here are names I think are tier 1. I'm mainly going to go for CSGO and League of Legends here, with a couple of others smattered in. I'm not going to try and go into all the games. I think of these names. I think of Monte Cristo. I think he had fantastic on-camera presence, great technical ability, very good game knowledge at one point in time. I think of Richard Lewis, amazing desk host, can be a good pundit if you need to. I think he's a better desk host than a pundit. As a desk host, he could literally do TV segments live on TV without a fucking auto cue. Shit that I then worked with real mega industry professionals from TV that had no clue how to do that, didn't even know that was possible. Someone like sjokz, I think, has almost the whole skill set. Maybe not as much game knowledge, but you actually don't know because her job isn't to do game knowledge. Probably has better game knowledge than the majority of fans watching, has played the game at a higher level than the majority of fans watching. You just don't know that. I think Red Eye is an old school guy who updated his skill set for the modern day. Again, super likable, great voice, great on-camera presence, reacts so well to others. Anders had to work on some of the technical skills, but obviously fantastic natural talent, very, very likable, charismatic guy, really great at throw-offs, works well with anyone, hypes it, does interesting side points. Semler, probably the greatest hype man ever for my money. Unbelievable, just his enthusiasm, excitement just gets you into the game, has his own decent technical skills, even though I think that's an area he's worked on a lot the last few years, even though people might think he's past his prime. Moses, probably the best glue guy to ever work on a desk or a fucking cast ever, had very good knowledge. Here's an example. Maybe Sponge has better game knowledge than Moses. I don't know, it's debatable. But here's the difference. Moses' way of delivering that game knowledge, if he's a caster, now that Sponge is a caster sometimes, you'll see, Sponge hasn't yet gotten to that level. He's learning his skill set. Moses has done it for longer. Yanko came in with all the game knowledge and then had to level up a lot of the other areas. Sponge himself came in with an incredible base talent stack and kept working and still works to this day. And I think is the far and away the best in CSGO. Froscorin was someone where I think at the end, she started to unfortunately go back almost into anti-charisma, but there was a period of time, a sweet spot, I'd say up until about 2018, where the charisma, 2016 and 2018, I think she really started to hit her stride. And technical skills were there, very good on camera presence, charismatic, almost a complete skill set. Doa, one of the best ever play-by-players, but funny at the same time, great teammate, handoffs, working well with other people, reacting to other people. Papa Smithy took the knowledge game and made it kind of like a modern-day Monty at the time. It was very polished. He was a gentleman with how he did it. He could burn people, but without being rude. Jat, I think, was someone, again, listen, maybe he went a little bit too much on regional bias. You could debate that. But I think actually everything else, there's a reason I always used to say it. People used to miss this. I used to literally say, during the years Monty was my friend and I worked with him on shows, that Jat was my favourite analyst in League of Legends. People missed that because they heard me diss him on other things. I thought he was the best, and I still think he was a very, very good caster even at the very end, and I'd love to hear him, analyst rather. And I think he's the king of the analyst desk in League of Legends, quite frankly. Henry G, probably the best color commentator ever in CSGO, just brought it all by the end. And even though his game knowledge was very good, that wasn't even the main thing you think of when you think of him. And then if you want to talk about fantastic play-by-play skills and charisma to go with it, Sadikist. I don't think anyone's ever done it better in the history of esports. Now, I've got a whole bunch of names I can list who I think are closing in on it. Maybe some of them make it there, or some of them, I think they maybe stopped at this point. For me, they were borderline. They needed some other aspects. I think people like Harry, I think is actually the main caster I see potentially being tier 1. I think he's almost always really there. We just need the big lands back to put him in that environment. Freya has the skill set, but she's working the smaller events right now, so she's going to have to learn how to do it a bit more freeform when she goes up to the big tier 1 lands when they come back. I think Scrawny, again, he's just waiting for the lands. He's right there as a play-by-play. He's doing a great job. He's really worked on his persona, and he's gotten very, very consistent. I think Maniac has got an all-around skill set now. He's not just the guy who's too nice now. Now he knows how to deliver a little bit of criticism, but also you balance him off with other people. I think Potter was in the same boat, but she obviously is much, much further back in the career because she only started going up to the bigger events in the last year or two. I think if she kept going though, I don't know what she's doing now unless she's a Valorant pro. I think she could have been tier 1 one day. She was right on the door knocking, in my opinion. Same with my boy Maui Snake. Just need more experience and to work on these skills and to learn, I think in his case, learn how to be a good teammate. Learn how to set other people up. Don't just take the ball and do your shot. Sometimes learn, I could have a shot here, but this guy hasn't had a shot. When you learn to do that stuff, that's what I've tried to do a lot of my career, and it'll round out your game. Ender from the LEC, I thought had again, really nice knowledge base, charismatic, funny, could be serious, worked well with seemingly anyone. Very young in his career, so he still had a long way to go. For me in NA, the one that was close to breaking through was Azael. I feel as though the problem with him is though, this is purely intuition. I always had like a vibe where it never quite kicked over in the charisma. Like the rest was all there. It was very smooth, very, very professional, buttoned up, looks good, can make a joke, but I never quite kicked over the charisma. Like it never got into full, like naturally, this is just so likable. It's like, I sort of like him. And yeah, I can see reasons why. I think LS, listen, he has the game knowledge. And if you put him on desk segments or his own shows, he's the best. But I think sometimes that didn't always translate, a bit like my mate DDK, to doing the segments. Like sometimes a bit too verbose, or sometimes you can tell when he can't say what he really thinks. It's a live Riot broadcast. For me, Kobe was a very likable guy, had good basic technical skills. I never kind of fully bought that he had the game knowledge though. Like sometimes his game knowledge seemed a bit simplistic. I know again he's appealing to LCS fans, but I judge you on an absolute scale to some degree. I thought Sean Gares, like Sponge, could be a sponge. He could be the one of the best in the whole game. He just didn't do it enough. He didn't commit to it yet. And similar with Lurpus back in the day. Certainly the charisma would have been a little bit of a struggle for him, but if you work with the right people, they could set him up. He can be funny in his own way, and certainly had a very interesting approach to the game. Not just a pro player's mindset, but an analyst's mindset. I think in games like Dota, yeah, way too many analysts, hence why just being a memer is the alternative. Like, I don't really know why they don't have the proper balance there. Then you go into games like Call of Duty, it seems like, where is the analysis? Is this all just typecasting? So being tier 1, there's a lot of elements go into it. A lot of people you might like aren't necessarily tier 1. And it's something that even people who are tier 1, they got to keep working at it, or they'll soon find themselves passed up and overtaken. This video was kindly supported by Eddie, Lager15, Pronogo, Shenlong, Zachary Carter, Alexander Rao, Andreas Kroknes, Animosity, Dean Tanglis, ErikHillestad, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and as always, special thanks to my dude, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest? Would you like to ask a question in one of those monthly AMA videos I do? Do you want teasers on who the upcoming guests are? Or maybe you want to take part in a discussion about esports with moi? Well, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skrilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.